So without further ado, first of all, very excited. We had an NSMA board meeting via Zoom yesterday, and as you tell behind me, even though I'm wearing the white shirt, Greater Winston-Salem Inc. decided to sign on as a sponsor. It helps to have the president of Greater Winston-Salem Inc. as a board member, but they know that we have members from all over the country and like to get the word out. So they just rebranded. So welcome to Greater Winston-Salem Inc. And thank you to Mark Owens, who's on our board, who is the president of the organization. Without further ado, this is the third in our continuing education series that we are presenting, as we all have nothing to do, sitting at home. And I'll show you quickly, for those who didn't see last time, I'm in my dining room. And let me just lose the my virtual background for a sec. So there's the ugly celery-colored walls that I can't say that too loudly because I think my wife's within earshot. But anyway, welcome everybody. Our guest needs no introduction, so I'm just going to give a short one. I remember 2010, my first year working in NSMA, which was then NSSA. We did a Women in Sports Media panel, and Lesley was gracious enough to come and participate. And we talked about her being a pioneer, that she said, so many people have called me a pioneer that if I hear it one more time, I'm going to start wearing a coonskin cap. Starting out at the Boston Globe and on to television with ESPN and CBS Sports. I believe she's covered everything there is to cover, just won a Lifetime Sports Emmy, the first woman to do that, to add to her list of firsts. So without further ado, my good friend Lesley Visser, hello.
Thank you for saying that. I remember I had so much fun in Winston-Salem, and the good news, bad news about this group is that one of my longest best friends I see has joined, Cindy Schmerler, of course, writes quite a bit for the New York Times. I've been all over the world with her covering tennis, and unfortunately, she holds all the memories that I really do not want to hear again. But what I can share with you is it was very meaningful to me, Dave, and to all of you to become part of your Hall of Fame. You know, the list of people before and after is so enormous. And I won't forget, about 3 years ago, I wrote a book about kind of my memory of all the years in our business. And Bob Ryan called me and he said, you cannot get a ghostwriter, which most people in TV get. He said, if you don't write every single word yourself, Dave Gorn is going to throw you out.
Not true.
Okay. Well, I did write every word.
So let's talk about, for the people who don't know how you got started, how did that happen? Were you still in college when you got in, or had you graduated and then was Globe the first job, Boston Globe?
Yeah, the good and bad of my career is I never got to make my mistakes. I'm sure you're all going to want to hear the embarrassing moments, of which I have plenty, and that is usually what people want to hear. But I have the advantage or disadvantage, whatever, of starting in either, a small paper in Hawaii or at a small television. I started at the Boston Globe, which I know all of you respect as I did so much, and then I went right to network television, really before ESPN and CNN were very much involved. It was really the three networks, and CBS, when I first went to them, they had all the properties. We did the Super Bowl, we did the Final Four, we did the Olympics, we did the NBA Finals. So, but my journey really, just like all of you today, I would imagine we all love sports as kids. Other kids love poetry or music, but I love sports. I was privileged to grow up in Boston, where we had Bill Russell and Ted Williams and Bobby Orr. And I started going to Fenway probably when I was about 8 years old, 6-4-3, my favorite play in baseball. And then my family moved quite a bit. So I got to see, we lived in Cincinnati, that's big time Ohio State football country, and we lived in Maryland. So that was some ACC, and we lived overseas. But when I was a junior in college, I always wanted to be a sports writer. It's kind of a famous story now, but if you haven't heard it, my family did move a lot, and we were living in Cincinnati. And when I was about 10 years old, my mother, I can really picture it in my head. We were crossing a street, and my mother said to me, "What do you think you want to be when you grow up?" I was 10 years old. And I said, "You know what? I want to be a sports writer." And my mother, instead of saying, "Oh, forget that. Girls don't do that. You have to be a teacher, a nurse, a domestic, a housewife, a secretary," she said to me, "That's great. Sometimes you have to cross when it says don't walk." And it really gave me permission to fly. So in my junior year at Boston College, by the way, all of you can survive so much. My 2 editors on the Boston College paper were Lenny DeLuca and Mike Lupica. And I have lived to tell. But I applied for a Carnegie Foundation grant. They gave out 20 in America. I know this is going to sound like the 1800s, but in the early 1970s, all white-collar jobs were men. So I applied to be a sports writer. One woman got it from Michigan for archaeology. A woman from Johns Hopkins got it for ophthalmology. And I got it for sports writing. And that's how I got to the Boston Globe.
Wow. By the way, great way to win a bet at a bar or a restaurant or wherever is to dare somebody to spell ophthalmology.
I can spell Krzyzewski.
Even better.
R-Z-Y-C-E-W-S-K-I. And you know what? Remember all this? Remember, there was a time we did not know him. And one of the first times I talked to him, I said, "Gosh, Coach, your name is so hard. It looks like the bottom of an eye chart."
There you go. Well, your pal Dave Sims said he just emailed and said he doesn't have the invitation for this. So we have to get him on. And so you get to the Globe, and what was the reception like from the people who were there? That was pretty much a veteran sports department, yes?
Yeah, it taught me so much. I really have trouble when people say to me, when I'm interviewed all the time, and they say, "Oh, and you got your start in print?" And I always say, no, print was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Being at the Boston Globe really dwarfs or is why I am who I am. And it was, I could learn from all of them. I learned, I mean, gosh, you go in the office every day. You remember we used to go into offices, and there'd be Donna, on the phone. He'd have Pete Rozelle on one phone and Al Davis on the other, who of course hated each other. And then it was Bob Ryan on basketball and Peter Gammons on baseball. I'd go to Wimbledon with Bud Collins. So I really learned so much from them about developing sources, keeping sources, showing up after a tough story. I remember one of my early embarrassments. The Globe had I don't know what they thought they were doing. Vince Storia, the great Vince Storia. They made me the first woman to cover the NFL as a beat. And I remember coming back, oh God, I can't believe I'm going to tell this story. Okay. I'm down at Patriots practice, and they were struggling on the offensive line. And so I asked Chuck Fairbanks, who thought I was from Mars anyway, but I asked Chuck Fairbanks, who's going to start at left tackle? They had Tom Neville and Bob McKay, and he wasn't quite sure. And so he said to me, neither one can play the position. Is that the scoop of all time? The Patriots are going to play the vaunted Miami Dolphins, and the coach says to me, nobody can protect the quarterback. So I go driving back to the Globe in my AMC Pacer, which I paid like $150 a month for, and of course was the worst car ever made. But I drive back to the Globe like 1,000 miles an hour. I say this, next day, front page of the sports section, it's that Coach Fairbanks says, neither one can play the position. My phone rang at like 5:45 in the morning. I cannot reveal the language, but you could imagine it was Chuck Fairbanks. What the F is wrong with you? What planet are you from? I said, either one can play the position.
One letter.
Oops, yeah. Can I have a vowel? So the Globe gave me enormous opportunities. I got along with the writers really well. Some of the players, coaches had no idea what I was doing. The wives hated me. That was actually a real challenge early on. That the wives would wait for their husbands after the games, and they would have like a little gathering, and they all hated me. So and for all of you too, I'd like to hear some of your embarrassing stories. Now would be a good time. How about it, Bob, James, Lincoln?
We only have an hour.
Oh.
Nobody wants to share an embarrassing story? Go ahead and unmute. Go right ahead. I'll do one of mine. Speaking of language that you didn't share, I actually dropped the F-bomb on TV one night, completely got tongue-tied. It was hockey highlight. And I said, whoever the goalie was tries to find the puck, but instead of saying, but the puck finds him, you can imagine what I said. Not one single phone call. So,
you were out of luck? Is that the word?
That was it, yeah. But nobody called. I guess nobody was watching, so.
That's pretty bad. Jump in, please, with an embarrassing story, or I'll have to tell another.
So who else was in the, Matt, was that you, or are you just stretching? Matt?
No, yeah, I've got one.
Okay, go ahead.
Leslie, I'm Matt Krause. I do radio play-by-play for North Carolina Tar Heels women's basketball. We have a player.
Wait, before you go on, you think Cole Anthony will be in the top 5 or more like top 10?
I'm thinking somewhere in the 6 to 10 range.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Back to your embarrassing moment.
So we have a player. She was a freshman this past year. She's actually Dikembe Mutombo's niece, and her last name is Chitenge, spelled Tshitenge. And her very first game, I was trying to say Chitenge sits on the bench. Literally said something else. Caught myself and thought, okay, I got it out of the way her first game, and was hoping no one heard. But then I go on the Inside Carolina message board after the game, and sure enough, someone says, Matt's going to have to watch himself her entire career.
Oh,
so
that is really good. That's good. I've had so many, but I had another one at the Globe where I hope all of you had the chance to cover high school sports, because I think it's just such a great training ground. So I had Division IV football in Massachusetts, which, as all of you know, Massachusetts football isn't that great. Well, Dave, I didn't even get to cover you. Taunton was way beyond me.
Yeah,
So,
you may have taken a call back when I was in high school. I used to call in the scores to the Globe Sports Department. So.
oh, excellent. Well, all my Shaughnessy had Division III, Kevin Dupont had Division II, and our school editor Neil Singlace had Division I. So it meant that all my schools had 2 names. They were kind of regional. Acton, Boxborough, Lincoln, Sudbury. So I always had the Nantucket Martha's Vineyard game, for which I would have to take the ferry over, cover the game, and we all had to do this, run up and down the sideline in the rain with your umbrella in one hand, keeping stats in the other, and then take the ferry back. So, okay, when you're first covering football, not watching it from when you grew up, but covering it, how they get up to the 50 and then you got to do the math, okay, because now it's the 50, but it's the 48 or the 36. Okay, so, I've got a lot going on. So I would just give the kid an extra 20 yards. Really? Who cared? Or in the Boston Globe, I always gave the kid extra yards. Okay, so one day I'm in the Globe and the phone rings at the main desk and they say, Lesley, it's a call for you. And I pick up the phone. I say, hello, Lesley Visser. And I hear, Lesley, this is Coach Paul Bryan of Alabama. I see that you got a kid up there from Martha's Vineyard rushing for 400 yards a game. You think we ought to be looking at this kid? I'm like, Coach, I really don't think that the parentheses fisherman's son 5 is really going to play for you down in Tuscaloosa. So the one thing I always tell young people, maybe some of you have not been through this, but well, Matt just shared, and so did you, Dave, that nobody really prepares you for humiliation. You can know the game, know the rules, know what's going on, know what to write or what to say, but being humiliated is something that you just have to roll with. You can't really prepare for it.
I think we've all been there at least once, at least. Developing a writing style, How difficult was that for you?
Oh, that's a great question. Leads came really easily to me. For some reason, I'd grown up reading. My mom was an English teacher, so it was just books, books, books all the time, which I really counsel young people that knowing stats, I think, is less relevant than having read everything. Even the great Red Smith, our first Pulitzer Prize winner in sports, he always said, just read, 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 read everything so you'll have perspective and analogies. So, and I'd been an English major, so leads they weren't hard for me. Deadline wasn't hard for me. I had to learn to do really good takeouts. And the Boston Globe at that time, maybe some of your papers, I mean, it was a huge budget. We were a national sports paper, and I had to learn, be like almost writing a Vanity Fair article, lots of sources. We'd travel lots of places to do a story, and I really had to learn how to write long. So I don't know, like, Cindy, will you jump in, because you've had to do lengthy stories and you were an editor of a magazine. Is it a skill?
You know what? I actually had the opposite problem because I started in magazines. I started at World Tennis Magazine, and so I knew how to write long. And I like to set a scene. So I like to have you imagine that you're right there with the person. It was when I went briefly to USA Today, where of course they could win a Pulitzer in Best Investigative Paragraph. And I struggled with how do I do that. So, and now back at the Times, I'm fortunate where I get to do longer takeouts. So I'm kind of back writing magazines for a newspaper.
Yeah, it's a skill. I hope we don't lose it. We're all going through. I think Dick Weiss told me the other day, could this be that something like 2,500 newspapers have gone out of business in the last 15 years? Is that possible, Dave?
I don't know the exact number, but it's too many. And there are too many people losing their jobs in the last couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, but I think storytelling will never go out of business. So I don't know what the pivot will be. Maybe newspaper reporting will be Zooms now, or maybe taking it more to radio. But I just think people, they want to know stories.
You talked about leads coming easily. Were you somebody who wanted to come up with a really creative lead, or were you nuts and bolts? This is what the crux of the story is going to be.
No, I was trained. The Globe was a writer's paper. That's what we were known for. And I can remember being at Wimbledon. Cindy was there for this one when Martina, who'd already won 1 million of them in a row, and she was leading Steffi Graf. And then it started to pour. And when they came back out, Steffi Graf beat her, which really launched Steffi's career. And I remember my lead from there was, it was a rain delay, REIGN, that would last until the end of time. So that was more my style. And the Globe had all kinds of writers. We had funny writers, we had clever writers, we had great columnists, Montville and Ray Fitzgerald. So you really it was a whole buffet of excellence, and I couldn't approximate them, but I could learn from them.
Was it an internal competition there? I want to be as good as, if not better than these guys.
No, it was very supportive, because kind of everybody had a piece of the pie. But you remember, everyone thinks PTI originated with Kornheiser and Wilbon, but the Boston Globe had Ryan and Gammons, and they were, Wilbon, Mike's brilliant, but much younger. And every single day in the office, it would be an argument about anything. It would be who sweats more, Elvin or Wes Unseld, or best Beatles song. And they would argue things we said today because they're down notes versus you just can't beat She Loves You. So anything and everything. And, of course, DiMaggio Williams was a constant argument. But no, I didn't feel, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't feel people weren't rooting for each other. We'd get named the best sports section in America as a team. So.
What comes first for you? Being a good reporter, being a good writer?
I think you can't be a good writer unless you're a good reporter. So, I think it's a process of gathering the facts correctly and then translating the facts. And sources are really a tricky thing because you can hear from a lot of people, a lot of things, and I liken them to, I covered a lot of derbies. They're like whispers on the backside, and you cannot count many of them, even if it's from somebody who has a big name and you're young. But I think to really be an effective reporter, writer, you need sources that take a while to cultivate. It's not going to just happen. And one thing that was good for me, because I was not allowed in, there were no provisions for equality the first 6 years that I covered the NFL, it made me have to do everything myself. You know, in the parking lot, I'd have to choose, okay, am I going to run over to interview Terry Bradshaw as he was going out to the Steelers bus, or there goes Steve Grogan, who lost the game, but the Globe readers want to read about the Patriots. So I had to do all the reporting myself, get their phone numbers. And I know maybe some of the people on here wouldn't remember, there was a time that you'd call an athlete and you might wait 5 hours till that person called you back. And then finally, when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would call you back, you'd have to say, oh no, it was nothing. Meanwhile, you're staring at the phone for 6 hours. So, but yeah, I think you had to have a patience for the job and then be fast on deadline.
You make the transition into TV. Was that something you were looking to do, or did that just happen?
100% no, and I will tell this story myself before Cindy tells it and mortifies me. I had no interest. For me, television was Walter Cronkite, and Diane Sawyer. It certainly wasn't anybody that I thought I would ever know or be. And CBS came to me, and they said it was a great Ted Shaker and Neil Pilson. And they came and they said, we had a woman, the great Phyllis George, who was, so popular, albeit and gorgeous. And they said, we had a woman who knew television, but she didn't know sports. And Phyllis wasn't expected to know sports. So they said, this time we want to flip it. You know the sports and we'll teach you the TV. Which leads to my first week on television, which also leads to one of my everlasting, mortifying experiences. I went from the Globe to CBS, and the first assignment was the US Open. It was in the fall, in September. Did I mention I had just gone to TV? Right, got there, okay. So what did I know? Somebody talks in your ear, you stop talking, right? That's how you're raised. The producer 7 times screams, what the hell are you doing? So my first assignment was the US Open, and Hana Mandlikova had a great run that summer. She was also from Prague after Martina. Many of you know the OVA stands for daughter of, Navratilova, Sharapova, Hana Mandlikova. So she had a great summer and was out on court 16. This was like, honestly, my first or second time on television, which was also network television, and the US Open, which then, was all those great Americans and everybody was watching. So Brent Musburger said, let's go out to Lesley Visser, who's with Hana Mandlikova. And Hana had this amazing run up the rankings. So I said to her, Hana, to what do you attribute your sudden rise in the rankings? Right here, I'm with my, oh, by the way, I look like I had rigor mortis. It was not natural at all. It was like this. Hana, to what do you attribute? Like I'm at the SALT agreement. Hana, to what do you attribute your sudden rise in the rankings? And she says, in her very thick Czechoslovakian accent, well, I think it is my new couch. Okay, so I thought, I don't know. Maybe she's sleeping better, something, what do I know? So I said, oh, did you get some new furniture? And she says, she's 16, I'm about 30. She says, don't be ridiculous. Betty Stova, my new coach. That's right. That's right. And Brent's head hits the table, and CBS played it every year at the tennis seminar.
Am I permitted to throw in one thing? I believe what Hana said to you is, no, stupid.
Oh, she did. She might have said, "Don't be so stupid," instead of "Don't be so ridiculous."
But I want to throw in one thing to say about my great friend, because she always sells herself short. But I think what Lesley has taught all of us, both in print and in television, is that being smart, doing your homework, and having a sense of humor will really take you a long way in this business. And I think that there are generations behind her that look up to her. I, of course, will never look up to her because we're about the same height and we've known each other too long and we have each other's secrets. But I think there are so many women who will fall down in front of you and thank you for paving the way for all of us throughout their careers.
Oh, thank you, Cindy. I won't recall the time that Yvonne Lendl blew me off and went to do a story with you, but thank you, Cindy. Thank you.
And we should mention that you were the first winner of the Mary Garber Pioneer Award through AWESOME, the Association for Women in Sports Media. And Mary Garber, special place in our hearts here in Winston-Salem for so many years, covering sports for the Winston-Salem Journal. One of, if not the first, woman to cover sports. And I tell people
she was a giant.
When I first got here, all of 4'0", but those granny glasses, until you got to know her, she scared the crap out of me. But once I got to know her, the absolute best. So there are those ties with the organization too. So talk to me about, you're going to all these big events. You're first woman sideline reporter for Monday Night Football. What is that like on a week to week or daily basis, where you're flying all over the world in some cases and getting to go to all these big events?
Well, it's funny. It was just such a privilege. I'd covered the NFL for quite a long time by the time Monday Night Football, but still, we all grew up that music. It was still on ABC. I actually worked, most of my career was ABC, and I did a little bit for ESPN, but mostly I did figure skating around the world with Peggy Fleming and Dick Button. That was ABC. Monday Night Football was ABC, the Triple Crown. But I have a story to share with you. So it was a privilege. When I was on Monday Night Football, it was still on ABC. It was Dan Dierdorf and Frank Gifford and Al Michaels. And Al Michaels texted me yesterday because he saw that we were going to do this. And he said, "Of course, you're going to spend the whole time saying how great I am." And I said, "Okay, Al, I'm going to have to tell the story." Al Michaels, I'm sure all of you guys know him well. He's just, to me, he and Jim Nance, Dick Enberg, there really are a few who are the Mount Rushmore, and they never let the broadcast hang. You never not know where it's going, which is really difficult to make it look easy. So I did a World Series with Al Michaels and Tim McCarver and Jim Palmer. We did the Cleveland, Atlanta. And now I'd done World Series with Jim Cott at CBS, but I'd never done it for ABC. So I was, nervous. And so after, maybe it was the first or second game, must have been the first game, we got into the stretch limousine. Networks really had big money then. And of course, Al had already provided for himself the Johnny Walker Blue. And Al is like brilliant, but he's a diva. He's a complete diva, which he does not deny. So we nothing from McCarver or Jim Palmer or me. And there was Al's, his scotch. And so I'm nervous, right? So I say, wow, Greg Maddux really had great stuff. And Al Michaels looks at me and he says, "Lesley," that's what he called me, Lesley, after the game, we don't talk baseball, we wreck people. He was a scream. He's a scream.
Especially after a scotch or two.
Yeah, well, I was a scotch drinker. So then by the next game, McCarver, who, as you guys know, was a wine expert, and I had tequila. So, but Al was really, I really learned a lot from Al. He's of the, just the appropriate amount of what to say, which is a skill. You guys all know when somebody's going on and they treat a broadcast like a radio play-by-play or color, that Al, as is Jim Nance, as was Dick Enberg, Vern Lundquist. I got to work with all the greats, people who really understand television and what it should be for the viewer.
sideline reporting is an odd job as somebody who does it on radio. What were the biggest challenges for you? Because you can't really pick and choose your times to talk.
No, and I'll tell you how it's changed. And then remind me, I'd like to ask all of you how I think the entire business changed. But I was the first woman, an NFL sideline reporter, because they hadn't, I guess Lynn Swan, right? That's why I replaced on Monday or followed on Monday night. But generally, except for Monday night, nobody had them. So, and at that time, you didn't have a producer with you. Now every sideline reporter has a producer for the sideline, but mine was just running around myself. And people would be surprised how much physical work there is, because something might happen on one sideline, then you're running to the other. And, I had no role model for how to dress. So I hope none of you remember my unfortunate hat phase, which I'll never forget. We were doing a game, a Chicago Bears game, and it's freezing in Soldier Field, right? So I had what I thought was, a lovely, appropriate hat. And Ted Shaker, the producer, I was rehearsing for myself before they threw it to me. And Ted Shaker came running out of the truck, screaming over to the Bears sideline and said, "You have got to take that hat off." And I said, "What do you mean?" Or it was sort of electric blue. But I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "No, it looks like a satellite dish." But are there any women on here? Where are you? Liv? Is that how you pronounce it, Cindy? You cannot have hat hair on network television. So the hat, like the kid stays in the picture, the hat stayed in the picture. But there are things that you have to learn, which I've tried to pass on to, Michelle and Tracy Wolfson. They're all so great. Oh God, what did you do that for? Who is that? Robert.
Robert? No. Robert's an NSMA board member.
That's the end of the Christmas card, Robert.
We're going to have to remove him.
Yes, so.
There are more.
Yes, I know. Oh my God. And everything lives on Google. That's why I don't even bother my age. But oh God, that's not bad. That's a derby hat. All right, that's enough.
Okay.
But actually, will you hold that up again, Robert? I'm going to take a picture of that and send it to you. There was a time that my hats looked all right. Okay, now let me see how I do this. Is this how I do this? Is that right? No.
While you're doing that, I like it. That looks good, yeah. That's Robert.
Is that you guys?
Oh, Robert has the picture of you in the,
okay.
in the all pink there.
Are all you guys on it now?
Almost. I think we actually go to a second page. But
no, I think I have to flip this. Okay, is this?
You have all the.
Good? All right, now I have you guys all.
Everyone smile.
Okay, wait a sec. I have to pick up. Okay, right. I'm going to go right here. Okay, yeah, everybody's. Did I do it? But I can't see my hat in the picture now. Oh, well, forget it. Okay, I'm going to send it to all of you. Okay, is this as good as Jay Billis was?
Well, and I just messaged Ted Shaker on Facebook, and
oh, good.
He's seen the message, so hopefully he'll join us.
Wait, so okay, there's a hat. Hold on one second. Yeah, that's right. Ted should hear about this. Like I wasn't nervous enough, right?
Now I had we actually have another board member on, Diane Blixt.
Yeah,
hi, Diane. Of our board there.
Hi.
She asked what your favorite sports movie is or has been.
Oh, I tried to memorize Annie's soliloquy, Bull Durham.
And here comes Ted.
Worship at the Temple of Baseball. Yeah, I love Bull Durham. What about you guys? Everybody jump in with this.
Well, I can just tell you I cry every time I see Blindside.
Great one. Remember the Titans? That was great.
Hi, Ted.
What's yours?
I was just saying hi to Ted. Ted's on.
Oh, I thought you were. I thought, you know what? How about where guys actually say Caddyshack? Really? Really? Really?
It's my favorite golf movie.
No, Tin Cup. Where Lance, our great producer, Lance had a line in it. Really think he won the Academy Award. Lance would refer. And then Lance said he wouldn't do another movie because he didn't want to be typecast. Oh, there you are, TF Shaker.
Got to unmute.
Yeah,
Here
you
we
have to
go.
unmute. And Ted, I already talked about you twice.
You have to unmute, Ted.
Unmute. Do you know unmute?
Yeah, I
There
don't know
it is.
anything about TV.
That's one of the people I owe my career to right there.
Oh my God.
You know
No,
that.
no. It was just an opportunity, and you took it and just hit it out of the park. You did.
No.
You're huge.
I told the story, which is what led to this, how you came screaming out of the truck and told me to take that hat off because it looked like a sapling dish. Very nice.
It was
But you know-
it was bright blue. I remember the hat. It was a very cold day at Soldier Field in the playoffs. I don't know if the Giants were playing the Bears, but it was like below zero. But I was wrong.
You were not, but after that, I did not put in for expenses for the hat. I will tell you. But
In those days, it would have gone right through.
Ted, another time I was with Ted, which was, really probably the greatest achievement of my career. Well, two things. Ted was the one who signed off for me to go to the fall of the Berlin Wall, but also Ted. Oh God, you've been so great to me. So I still to this day am the only woman who's presented the Lombardi Trophy after, and we were in the production meeting before it, and you guys could imagine to put on a Super Bowl, you have the pre-games, you have the game, you have the post-game, just massive amounts of paperwork to go through, and the everything that goes into it, where the commercials are, everything. So we get to the post game, and Ted says in front of our entire everybody working on the Super Bowl, okay, and Lesley's going to handle the post game presentation. Now, Brent Musburger is sitting in this room, Terry Brett is in this room, and everybody's mouth, including mine, went, what? But thank you, Ted.
You know what was good for me? And I'm sorry to just dive in, Dave.
Well, I invited you, so. And you've been gracious enough to appear on both of our podcasts so far.
I was honored to do it, and I appreciate the invitation. But what I was going to say is, when you have somebody of Lesley's talent and ability, knowledge of the subject, and she is what's a good way to make a statement? That we live in a different time, that there are people that you wouldn't normally think you'd put in position A or position B, but because of the quality of their work and their ability, let's make a big statement and say, Lesley is going to be the host of the post game of the Super Bowl, which is the last thing everyone's going to remember and see. And she just hit it out of the park. I just felt so honored to be able to ask her.
Was that your idea, Ted?
Pardon?
Was that your idea?
Yes.
And was there universal agreement on that?
There wasn't really, no, there was, wait a minute. No one said, what are you doing? It was kind of like, yeah, that's a good idea. And because of who Lesley was, and, the respect people had for her. So to me, it was a chance to make a statement, and we did.
Well, thank you, Ted. You meant so much to me. There was one it would have been a minor glitch had it not been the Super Bowl, which, as you know, goes to a million people. And that was after the game, it was the Redskins beat Buffalo. And so on the podium were Paul Tagliabue and Joe Gibbs and Jack Cook, who then owned the team. And I made the mistake of letting Jack Ken Cook actually put his hand on the microphone. And so, of course, Jack Ken Cook wanted to take the microphone, talk all about how he started selling Encyclopedia Britannica in Canada and how he bought the Chrysler building and the Forum. All the world could hear was Bob Stenner screaming in my ear, "Get the effing mic out of Jack's hands." And it was like this. back and forth for all the world to see.
It's the truth.
Ted, before you came on, we were talking about favorite sports movies. Do you have one?
Oh, sports movie?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I heard you say, Dave, when I dropped in out of the sky. You guys are talking about Caddyshack. I love Caddyshack.
No.
I love Major League.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are comedies. I love The Natural. I love A League of Their Own.
A couple others. Let's see. Slapshot, Hoosiers, Friday Night Lights.
Yeah.
Hoosiers. Oh my God, that
was
always
a
gets
wonderful
voted.
movie.
Matter of fact, I just interviewed Angelo Pizzo, who wrote it. Remember, he wrote it, and he also wrote Rudy. So imagine you're one
Boy,
and you write
good.
two of the most famous. But
What were the
Yeah.
other ones you guys talked about?
I said
Those were the three. Anybody else have any? How about Breaking Away? You know, it wasn't really about cycling. Cycling was in
That
it.
was
That was
great.
a great movie, I thought.
We then, back then it was called the CBS Sports Spectacular.
Mhm.
And we ended up going to Indiana University and recording one of the races,
Little 500.
the Little 500, and made it into a, like a 20-minute thing. It was, that was a great movie.
Mhm.
It was written by Steve Tessich, who also wrote, whatever the heck, it was kind of also a bicycle riding story in Colorado. I think it was Kevin Costner's first movie, and I got to know Steve Tessich a little. So he made a character named Lesley in this other one, American Macros or whatever. But of course, the character was, who's the woman who was in Dirty Dancing? What was her name? Remember her?
Jennifer Grey?
Yes, it was Jennifer Grey. Her name
good.
was Lesley in the movie. And she was like this bratty, whining, Eloise at the plaza. And I said, really, if you're going to make a character, you don't have to make her such a jerk.
Couple others. Let's see. Field of Dreams and Miracle.
Oh, yeah.
What about, does it count? And do you guys all know this? In Diner, do you guys all know who wrote the quiz in Diner? Remember, a girl couldn't
Mhm.
accept it unless she answered all.
Past the Baltimore Colts trivia.
Do you guys know who wrote that?
No.
Take a stab. Anyone?
Somebody from Baltimore?
It was the great Ernie Accorsi.
Huh?
Oh, what?
Ernie Accorsi wrote the quiz because at first he knew his name, the great screenwriter Levinson. Is that his name?
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, Barry Levinson.
Barry Levinson, thanks.
Writer,
Barry,
director.
yeah, well, Ernie knew him a little bit. So Barry showed him the quiz, and they were really stupid things like, what is Johnny Unitas's number? And Ernie was like, insulted, you have to. So his questions were like about Jim Much, Mike Curtis, these really bizarre things. But yeah, Ernie Accorsi wrote the quiz for Diner.
Wow. Good, that's a good one.
Ernie Accorsi, a graduate of?
Wake Forest.
Thank you. There you
On
go.
the what scholarship?
Arnold Palmer.
Yes, good job, Robert. I will send you
Wow.
a Christmas card.
Both my son and my daughter graduated from Wake Forest.
How about that?
Do we
It's a
have
small
a history?
world. All
Yes,
these
it
people from out of state are like, who cares? John
No, it's
Morris,
a
it's like,
great
hey, how about Baylor? Give Baylor a shout out. There you go.
A Baylor Bear?
It's Chris Paul.
Chris Paul. There you go.
Yeah.
My pal Chris. Anyway, Lesley, so Debbie Antonelli joined us late. Hi, Deb. How are you?
She's still here. Oh, hi, Debbie Antonelli. Oh, we love each other.
Hi,
Deb, how
Leslie.
about give us something good.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry I'm late, first of all. But I have a great admiration for Lesley. Obviously, we don't like to always hear the words pioneer and all that when we get to be our age, but certainly you all know what a bright light she is in our industry. And I'm just trying to follow along and try to do the best I can. And I'm so fortunate to be a small part of the CBS family. And it's thanks to the great work that people like Lesley do that allow other people like me to come along next and have a chance. So she's been a huge champion of my work with CBS, and she's always been encouraging. And it's just so refreshing when one of your role models treats you that way. So thank you, Lesley. And I don't know if that's what you wanted me to say, but that's what I was thinking.
Well,
Lesley wanted that.
thank you. No, thank you so much, Debbie. And I'll tell you about Debbie. Everybody at CBS loves her. And they always say whenever Debbie talks, everyone just listens to the accent because it's perfect. It's warm. You know, it's honey. Somebody described it's like honey. Where are you from? I forget.
Oh, well, I grew up in upstate New York, but I went to high school and college in North Carolina, and I live in Charleston, South Carolina now.
Oh.
So
Can we stay at your house?
yeah, we have the best place to live. I don't know where everyone else is, and I hope everybody's safe and healthy with their families, but we have the most remarkable weather. We have a great place to raise your family, and the only thing that gets you is the no-see-ums, and there's not really a cure for that.
And I will ditto what Lesley said. Debbie is one of the smartest people I've ever met. The people who run college basketball, you know, people always say that Jay Billis should be the commissioner. I think Debbie should be.
Oh,
Yikes.
Great
I'm up for
ideas,
that.
great ideas, well thought out,
And you know what,
and she
Debbie?
has my vote.
Jay's not so fast anymore. You could take him baseline.
All right, Lesley,
Well-
let's get back to talking
Thank you.
some journalism here. Difficult parts of sideline and being under pressure. What was maybe the scariest part, other than presenting the Lombardi Trophy, being on the sidelines and being under the gun?
Oh yeah, no, there are a lot of those. One, there's actually a little bit of a fear factor that somebody, you know, they're Olympic speed, those receivers, and that they are going to, because you have your back turned to the field, that somebody is going to misjudge the out of bounds, or somebody might come flying at you. And isn't that like a Walter Matthau movie, The Fortune Cookie? Didn't he get taken out on the sideline? So, I mean, that used to be, same thing with covering the Kentucky Derby. I was always sure, you know, those are babies. They've just turned 3, or they're counted as 3. And I was always sure one of them was going to like kick me, you know, in the paddock there with, you know, 150,000 people all screaming. And so that there's a little bit of the fear factor. There's also the freezing cold, which I have tried to pass this on to Michelle and Tracy and Pam Oliver. They're all great. You know, anyone you see at that level, they're great. But one thing you're not prepared for is that your mouth freezes. I remember once telling Jerome Bettis in Pittsburgh that he had to have a great game, because if he got hurt, I could not say in the cold, what was his name, Mustafa Ma'afala? I mean, his name possible to say with your mouth frozen. So one trick is you'd have to lean into the little heater at the end of the bench to like warm up your mouth before you went on. And also you had to be careful that somebody wasn't telling you something just so that, you know, that you would become a conduit to somebody else's, what someone else wanted out there that maybe wasn't true. I mean, Jimmy Johnson, you guys know, Jimmy Johnson always used to say, I don't talk to the media, I talk through the media. So, you know, that was another juggling act. Is this worthy? Is this not? Is this true?
And then he became the media.
I'll tell you, that was one thing that John Madden warned me about. I had the privilege of riding John's bus with him for years, which was really like riding around America with Mark Twain. But he said, Lesley, one thing you're going to have to adjust to, and probably Debbie has this, and Cindy does a lot of TV, I'm sure some of the others of you do, that it's a very strange thing coming from print. John said, you're going to have to adjust from becoming the observer to the observed. And that's a very different element in your life, where you are now the observed.
Well, let's talk about, you know, your position, wanted or not, as a role model for other women. And when you look and see today women, not just in writing or sideline reporting, but in Debbie's case, being a color commentator, and now I call it the growth industry in TV, is women doing play-by-play. What that's like for you to see that.
It's so fantastic. And I love all of them. And I love that someone can grow up now. I mean, some of you, Ted and Cindy, you guys know this, Dave, you too, that when I started, the credentials said no women or children in the press box. And to think that from that time, the early 70s till now, a young woman can aspire to anything. She can be play-by-play, she can be color, she can be a coach, she can be a writer, she can be radio. And there were no opportunities. I mean, there were no bathrooms when I started. It's a true story that I would sit in the press box and say to myself, okay, the Patriots have the ball 1st and 10 on their own 20, which, okay, they were not the gold standard Patriots then. And I would say, can I get down the press box across the field to the one public ladies' room and get back before they punted, which, usually was 3 plays later. So to go from that to now somebody like Debbie Antonelli, where people are respected and are taken seriously and should be, I just, really, I can die happy.
We've got about 15 minutes left. Anybody, if you want to ask a question, you can either send me a chat message.
Send him a check?
Chat, or that. There's a chat bubble there on the bottom of the tray on the screen. You can chat, or you can, as John Morris did, just put up his hand raise icon there. John, unmute yourself and go ahead and enlighten us.
Thanks, Dave. I don't know about that. Lesley, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it. My name is John Morris from Baylor University.
I know who you are, John Morris.
You're very kind. I'm curious, you've done so many things, so many huge events. You've done a lot. Is there anything that you haven't done that you would still like to do?
Oh, gosh, that's great. I have one personal regret and a professional regret. Personally, I've been a runner my whole life, not fast, but committed. I was one of those 5-mile-a-day guys, and I always wished I had run the Boston Marathon, but I made it too iconic in my own head. I actually had to cover Rosie Ruiz. Remember, she jumped on the trolley for 80% of the race, but I just made it. It was so big. Well, you would know that, Dave, how the Boston Marathon, the oldest of all the marathons. So that's a personal regret. Professionally, I guess, Ted, we never had this. I really wished I had covered the Tour de France. I would love to go up the Champs-Élysées toward the Arc de Triomphe and see that. I could really feel it. So that's one that I wish.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, John.
I just like to say Champs-Élysées and sound like
thank
took
you.
6 years.
Un autre vin, s'il vous plaît.
Ah oui. Neil Fisher, unmute, please. You have a question from lovely Orlando.
Hey, Lesley. First of all, I'm a newbie with the NSMA. I just joined a couple weeks ago, but I'm very much like you. I'm actually going to be 51 in 12 days, and I've worked as a print journalist for the last 30 years. And since you mentioned high school, about 90% of my work is in high school. I cover Wekiva High School. That's the W in the background. I just also, too, like to say, even though I'm a male, you've been someone I've looked up to for a number of years, so thank you, and this is really an honor. Also, I think it's great. You were just talking about women. I have a 7-year-old niece who is, she hasn't decided because she's 7, but she's been asking a lot of questions. So anyway, my question was basically, I'm also a student at the Full Sail down here, Dan Patrick School of Broadcasting too. But anyway, since I'm trying to transition from newspaper print into broadcasting, was there anybody in particular that you looked up to as a role model, and anybody you would recommend currently?
I'll tell you, thank you, Neil, and thank you for your thoughts. I think the same elements apply. They worked for me, and I would always counsel people. The 3 elements you need to make it in our business, doesn't matter, male, female, black, white, foreign, domestic. I think you need knowledge. Knowledge is unassailable. You really, because you're going to have to gain confidence, but if you have knowledge, that's unassailable. You need passion. If you don't love it, don't do it, because it'll come out. You'll resent somebody else's pay or someone else's assignment. So I think you need passion, and I think you need stamina, which sometimes people, they'll have a 1-year or 2-year career, but you're going to get knocked down, and you're going to get beaten on stories. Lots of things are going to happen. So I think you really need to have stamina. One thing I would recommend, Neil, or for anybody, is turning the sound down of a broadcast of somebody you admire. Like Jim Nance or Joe Buck, or pick somebody really near or at the top, or in radio, pick one of the great. We have Ian Eagle, who's brilliant in both radio and TV. And I would turn the sound down, and you do it yourself, and then turn the sound back up and see if that's kind of what they're doing. I would study off the greats. Kobe Bryant said every single one of his moves he learned from Michael. So I would say go to town on the greats.
Yeah, well, thank you. I was going to say, as a print journalist, I did the same thing. I grew up in Detroit, and Mitch Albom, of course, was at the top of the list. But I in the 80s, 90s, when the internet came around, I actually read a lot of your work, and Peter Gammon's and Bob Ryan. So yeah, just again, I think it's great advice. That's what I did as a print journalist. I got a whole stack of all the greats. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Neil. And I will tell you this, Cindy and I covered a number of Wimbledons with Mitch Albom. He was the most industrious, and he made it look the easiest. There was one year that he got up, I don't even know if he went to bed. He went out wherever it was, like 60 kilometers away from Wimbledon, to see actually where the strawberries were picked and how they were transported to Wimbledon to make, strawberry breakfast at Wimbledon. And we all, we're slugs, we all, drag ourselves on the tube out to Wimbledon to try to get there by 9 o'clock in the morning. And Mitch had this great story. So you were lucky to grow up with Mitch.
Dallas Cole. God, we have what, at least 2 people from South Dakota on with us today. Dallas is one. Go ahead, Dallas.
Thanks, Dave, and Lesley, thank you. My college journalism professor wrote for the Kansas City Star. One of his gold standards was everyone has a story. You just have to find it and tell it. Is that something that you subscribe to, and something you've leaned on through your news writing and sportscasting career?
Thank you so much. First of all, I spoke at, I don't know if this shows that my career is kind of down the tubes, but I loved it. I was invited to speak in Vermillion at the University of South Dakota in February. Okay, it was, Dallas, I swear to God, it was no degrees. And
now,
let
Lesley, time out here. Uh-oh. And James will attest to this. University of South Dakota in Vermillion is the other institution of higher learning.
You're South Dakota State?
I'm South Dakota State.
I'm talking about the state, though.
Yeah.
Don't you have a great women's basketball program at South Dakota?
Yes.
Yeah, you do. But
well, actually, credit due. Both South Dakota State and South Dakota are very good. So they both qualified for the NCAA tournament last year.
I knew you had a great, South Dakota State. No, it was more that had I been invited in June or July, but it was, I am not kidding, no degrees. And it was the Al Newhart School. I had won his journalism award, and I loved it. I had so much fun just driving. A girlfriend came with me. We drove all over South Dakota, and we had a blast. We stopped, what's that famous, the drugstore complex?
Wall Drug.
What's it called?
Wall Drug.
Yeah, Wall Drug, where you can actually have your picture taken with Jesse James or
Yep.
Calamity Jane. Yeah, no, I loved it. But I do believe everybody has a story. Each one of us, I could do absolute long takeout on every single person here. And you might think you don't want to tell it, but too bad, because I'm going to get it. Like Dallas, tell me what story that you couldn't believe that you got to do and how you knocked it out of the park.
Oh gosh. The one story I've done, every year in Brookings, we host an event that's called Longest Day Marathon. It draws runners from all over the country. The one gentleman I interviewed was a development director for a small college in, I believe it was North Carolina. And Dave, I don't remember the name of the school right off the top, but his name was Ed Barretto. And Ed was going head-to-head with a runner from Great Britain to see who could run the most marathons in a calendar year. So I did an interview with the guy and did the story with him and such for our radio station. At the end of the year, I just happened to pick up a copy of USA Today, just out of the blue, read the sports section. They wrote a story on him, and at the end of the year, he had gotten the record. 78 marathons in a calendar year at that point. The record now, I think, is something like 125 in that neighborhood. So, yeah.
See, that's great. That's great. Everybody is.
So, yeah, as you say, everyone has a story. And I subscribe to that wholeheartedly. I think that's very true. Everyone does have a story. You just have to find it and tell it. I agree to that. The other question I have for you, Lesley, you talked about some of the names of people you had worked with. A couple of names at CBS, and this will tell you how old I am. I was wondering if you ever worked with them and your thoughts. Pat Summerall and then the late Frank Gleber. I always enjoyed watching him and his work. Do you ever get a chance to work with those two?
Yes, those were also employees with Ted Shaker. Yeah, no, we had the 27 Yankees at CBS. Then it was Madden and Summerall. Frank Gleber, I can't remember. I did something with him. I remember we played tennis. Maybe it was the Pan American Games or something. Ted, maybe you can remember. I don't know. But yeah, he was huge. I remember I was assigned, before I really did all NFL, CBS assigned me to the Sun Bowl. I think it was called the John Hancock Bowl then. And that's when they had Summerall and Brookshire together. And basically they would be, in Mexico right up until kickoff. And so I don't know if Ted's still on. I think CBS broke them apart then. And that's when Summerall went with John Madden, who was, they were perfectly matched because John was outspoken and talkative, and Pat grew up under the Ray Scott era of minimalist. So yeah, it was a privilege to do games with both those guys.
Frank Gleber, if I may, Gleber was one, like Vern Lundquist, he could do anything and do it as well as anyone. He was a pro's pro. Just a wonderful guy, and just as talented as he could be.
Can I tell a story that I'm not sure Bill Raftery likes if I tell this story? So can I trust everybody here? You look like you're taking notes, James, down there. No notes. Okay. So
just know that this will be up on our YouTube channel, but I will take bribes to edit it out.
Well, Raf's going to have to live with it. It's too good. It was actually, I thought, the greatest 30 seconds of my entire career. So I had the privilege. Ted would, I did the Final Four with Brent and Jim Nance and, all kinds of, it was Billy Packer when I first started. And then I got to do a number of years with Bill Walton and Dick Enberg. That was great because we had Arizona in the tournament one year, and Bill Walton on the air started ripping his son. Luke, that's a terrible pass. So that was really great. And Dick Enberg, ever the gentleman, would have to say, oh, now, Bill, I'm sure he's doing the best he can. So, but I also it was just a privilege beyond belief. I had Vern and Billy Raftery and Vern for years. And Vern just is, as Ted said, he's just the greatest, makes it so seamless. And we always seem to get Penn, Pennsylvania in the first round. And they really didn't advance usually very far in the tournament. Okay, that one year back in the 1800s. But we always had Penn. And so we were on the air, and there was a play.
I might add.
Okay, we had Penn in the tournament, first round as usual, and it was great. Fran McCaffrey. It was a great program. But we're on the air, and all of a sudden, Raftery says something about Coco Archibong, to which Vern says, "Coco Archibong? where'd you get that? And Rafter says, ha ha, Vern, the things you learn late at night. To which Vern, without missing a beat, says, huh, by that standard, I must be working with Socrates. The greatest. Was the greatest.
We're Socrates. If it were Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, I don't know if anybody picked it. Socrates. Who else has a question for Lesley? We have about 5 more minutes. Rob J., go ahead and unmute. Gray Ost, you're next.
Okay.
Hi, Rob.
Well, thank you. Hello. Thank you, ma'am. I've been watching for a while, and I really appreciate this opportunity. I just wanted to know, during the time that you came up, you mentioned you having to go to a ladies' room. Did you face any other kind of discrimination, and how were you able to deal with it?
Rob, thanks so much, because you will 100% identify with this. I had prejudice from the white players. The African-American players were the best to me. And I used to go over, and this was reel-to-reel 8mm tape, and I would go over to Sugar Bear Hamilton's house or Tony McGee. Still to this day, they're my friends. And, they would say, here's the nuance between the 4-3 and the 3-4. And one time I said, why are you guys so good to me? And Sugar Bear said, because we know what it's like to be the only one. So my prejudice came from, and there were even times that I would be the bad guy, like Dale Murphy, who everybody loved. It was a playoff game, a Braves playoff game, and Dale Murphy announced, if she comes in the clubhouse, I won't speak to anybody. So that made me the bad guy, but all the people you'd expect and you'd love stayed outside with me. Peter Gammons, Dave Anderson, George Vesey. So I had to depend on the kindness of strangers sometimes, and people came through. But thank you for that question.
Yes, ma'am.
Gray Ost, who just finished his freshman year at Elon University, has a question. Gray.
Yeah, as you just said, freshman at Elon. I won't exactly mention my age because I don't want to embarrass you, Dave. But Lesley, thank you for being here. And I just have a question. Whether you're writing or whether you're working on camera, how do you kind of blend your personality and show the audience like a good side of you? Not necessarily, but like, how do you let your personality shine through without it being overbearing?
Boy, that's probably for other people to judge. But I used to feel really nervous. Like I said, I had rigor mortis, and people like Ted would say, just be yourself. But, you're not that sure of television when you first start. But I think it's okay. And it's okay to let your personality out a little, even if it doesn't work right away, because that's who you are. And probably, I used to think, hey, I must have been awarded these jobs because I have something to say and I can reflect what's going on in the game. So, it might sound hard, Gray, to trust yourself, but I would. And whatever your strength is, my default mechanism, as you guys can all tell, was humor. That's what worked for me. And, the other women on this know that, players would hit on you. And the way I would handle that is we didn't have human resources, but there was nowhere to turn, with something like that. So I would just say to them, now your mother didn't teach you to talk like that, which it worked perfectly. We'd laugh, no one wants to embarrass his mother, and the moment would move on. So I think you have to trust your own personality.
Gotta unmute myself there. Anybody else have a question before we let Lesley go? Robert Eggleston.
I'm curious, when you're on the sidelines, do you end up having a story, but then it goes 10 more minutes, and so then you have to keep coming up with a story every 5 minutes so that it's it's current, because you don't know when they're going to you?
100%. Tracy Wilson was just telling me the other day, and I remember these days, she makes something like 40 cards for every single game. And the sideline is you're contributing to the broadcast. That's your role. You're contributing with information or something that you know about a player or you learned about a player, and 90% of it is never to be seen again, ever. So yes, you're constantly adjusting on the fly. Somebody gets hurt, there's a weather factor. I remember when Mike Utley, it was a Detroit playoff game, and remember Mike Utley, he was paralyzed. And at that time, I don't know, for whatever reason, but I was allowed to go with Mike Utley back to the locker room and for the medical attention, which no one is allowed now. And, it was devastating. I mean, he absolutely was paralyzed. And I remember being outside the locker room and just really emotional, wondering what happened to him. And I think my report probably reflected how emotional it had been. His parents were sobbing back there. So you are supposed to be what the two broadcasters cannot contribute. That's your role, and it cannot be that you care how often you get on. And you also supplement them. Here's something I heard, maybe you could use it.
Anybody else? Well, Lesley, thank you so much. I couldn't be more pleased with one of my all-time favorites. And I have to admit, I was probably 14, 15 years old when you started at the Globe. So I wouldn't say I grew up reading you. I was by then an adolescent or into my high school years. And
she was 12.
She was 12, that's right. But
I had a player, I'll just tell you this, and then I have to tell you something about Dave.
Oh, jeez.
At the Super Bowl, not this year, but last year up in Atlanta, and I had a baseball cap on, but some player was giving me the, yo baby. And I swear to God, I looked at him and I said, are you kidding? I'm on Medicare. The guy went remember Home Alone? But I will tell you I'm one of the few people who actually knows Dave's real background and his name, which I think is Shul Gornge. Correct?
We talked about after my dad passed away in November, we found out my grandfather on my dad's side we knew him as Isidore Gorin. We found out he was from Ukraine and his name was Shroel Gorin Bine. So very good.
Thank you. Everything's a story.
Yes. Well, thank you all for joining us. We'll, in fact, David Halberstam, who's up there, I think he's still awake. Yeah, there he is, waving. David's going to join us.
There you are. Oh my God.
David's going to join us next Tuesday at 3 o'clock and talk about his sports media marketing management experience. And he, of course, runs Sports Broadcast Journal, which if you aren't following, you should. We steal all his articles and post them almost every day. But
everybody in my business,
go ahead.
I have to tell you, Dave Halberstam, everybody steals from Dave Halberstam. They do. And, he does those. You're supposed to act like you don't care. And then he'll do the top 10 play-by-play, and everybody in our business reads it. And everybody either sulks or brags about it. So there's a lot of power sitting right there.
And he will share his expertise with us next Tuesday, 3 o'clock Eastern. So those of you who are here, please join us then. If I keep talking, my wife will kill me because we're about to leave for the beach. So thank you again, Lesley. Thank you. We'll be in touch. Ted, good to see you. And thank you to Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. for sponsoring us. Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.